Chapter 31. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Sakura was not sad because of the failure of the battle, but said to Peony and Arceus behind her, "It's okay, we have tried our best." Peony and Arceus nodded. At this time, Zhang Rui wanted to take Kabutosaurus back, but suddenly found that Kabutosaurus level had been upgraded to level 31. After the Pokémon reaches the level 30 mark, it will be a very long process to upgrade the level. If upgrading the level is so easy, then all the trainers in the world will be league champions. After these 3 battles, Zhang Rui was very satisfied that Kabutosaurus level was upgraded by 1 level, and those Pokémon with lower quality will find it difficult to upgrade after 5 such battles. This is the magical effect of qualifications. Pokémon with good qualifications can upgrade by defeating a Pokémon casually, while those with poor qualifications need to play multiple games to be possible. The audience around felt a little sad when they saw Sakura failed, but they were still very satisfied to see such a wonderful battle, and they all stood up and prepared to leave. Sakura took out a blue badge from nowhere and was about to hand it to Zhang Rui. "Don't give it to him." The sudden voice made Sakura stop what she had just done and turn to look at the door. A girl with orange hair ran in from outside the door, panting. Obviously, she ran over. "Xiaoxia. Why are you back?" The 3 sisters said in unison, surprised by Xiaoxia's sudden arrival. This made Zhang Rui also confused. How could Xiaoxi get to Hualan City so quickly? But he had defeated 3 gym leaders, so why couldn't he get the badge? He asked Xiaoxia in the distance, "I defeated the 3 gym leaders with my strength, why don't you want to give it to me?" After Xiaoxia took a breath, she pointed at Zhang Rui in the distance and said, "In addition to defeating my sisters, you have to defeat me to get this blue badge." Zhang Rui was stunned when he heard it. "Aren't you cheating? I remember that it was not played like this in the anime. Either you can get the badge by defeating the 3 sisters, or you can get the badge by defeating Xiaoxia. Did he hit a time difference? I remember that when Xiaoxi challenged the gym, the 3 sisters said that their Pokémon had lost their combat ability and were still recuperating in the Pokémon Center. There was no way Xiaoxia could only appear on her own and fight Xiaoxi, and this time, Zhang Rui thought that he was too slow in challenging and delayed the time, otherwise the plot would develop normally. But it's okay, Xiaoxia came to give experience, why not? Okay, since you said so, then what's wrong with me fighting again? It just so happens that I want to see the strength of your 4 sisters of Hualan. At this time, Muten interrupted Zhang Rui's words and said to him, "It's not the 4 sisters of Hualan, it's the 3 beautiful sisters of Hualan and the ugly duckling." "Third sister." Xiaoxia said dissatisfiedly. "Okay, just fight quickly. We are still waiting for the badges." Sakura shook the badge in her hand and said to Xiaoxia, "Humph, I'll win for you to see." After saying that, he came to the edge of the competition venue, took out the poke ball in his pocket, and threw it out. "Go. My baby starfish." Looking at the starfish in front of him, Zhang Rui opened the data eye to check. This starfish was only level 20. No wonder Xiaoxi won easily. At such a low level, it would be enough to have a hand. If it were the 3 Hualan sisters, Xiaoxi would probably lose without even leaving any pants. "Kabutosaurus, can you still fight?" Zhang Rui turned his head to look at the Kabutosaurus on the water and asked. Roar. Hearing the response of the Kabutosaurus, Zhang Rui nodded, "Very good, use Dragon Wave on Starfish." The Kabutosaurus spit out a dragon-shaped phantom again, galloping towards the direction of Starfish at a high speed. Starfish, who had just come to the water, was hit in the body and flew out before she could react. "Starfish!" Xiaoxia said to the starfish on the wall behind her. The 3 Hualan sisters who were watching beside Zhang Rui shook their heads helplessly after seeing this. "This young man won this match, so please accept this blue badge." Since the battle had been decided, Sakura walked up to Zhang Rui, handed the blue badge to him, and turned to Xiaoxia and asked, "How is it? Do you have any complaints?" Xiaoxia spread her legs, knelt on the ground, took back the starfish with the poke ball, and said helplessly, "I lost this match." "Thank you." Zhang Rui took the blue badge from Sakura, thanked her, took back the Kabutosaurus, and turned to leave the gym. Coincidentally, when Zhang Rui was going out, he saw Xiaoji running over and Pikachu on his shoulder. Of course, there was also Xiaojiang behind Xiaoji, but what puzzled Zhang Rui was that Xiaojiang went to buy something. Why did he follow Xiaoji to the Hualan gym? Did the whole plot change because of Zhang Rui's intervention? This is the only possibility. Hello, Zhang Rui, we meet again. Xiaojiang and Xiaoji said together, and then the two looked at each other a few times, pointing and saying, you know him too? Yeah, long time no see. Zhang Rui nodded and greeted the two. Xiaoji said to Zhang Rui excitedly, have you got the badge? At this time, Xiaoji's eyes were fixed on the blue badge in Zhang Rui's hand, and he said with envy. Zhang Rui glanced at it and nodded, yes. It's still a bit difficult. Zhang Rui, I should thank you for meeting you this time. After all, if it weren't for you, I might not be able to realize my dream with Xiaoji. Xiaojiang said to Zhang Rui with excitement. He really wanted to thank Zhang Rui for his help. Without his help, he might still be accepting the challenge of the trainer in the Nibi gym. It should be. After all, I can't bear to see people who have dreams but can't realize them. After that, Zhang Rui and Xiaojiang chatted for a while, then said goodbye to the two, found a place where no one was, and left the dungeon. When Zhang Rui returned to the dormitory, it was already 4 o'clock in the morning. Ah! Have I been in the dungeon for so long? If I had known this, I would have ended the battle quickly. Zhang Rui, who had just returned to the real world, looked at the time and said a little sadly, at this moment, a notification came from the system, ding dong. Congratulations to the host for completing the challenge of Hualan Gym and receiving the reward of Intermediate Water Spirit Detector and Hualan Four Sisters Summoning Ticket, ding dong. The copy of Challenge Arena Boy has been unlocked. Do you want to challenge it? Zhang Rui was originally confused about the Intermediate Water Spirit Detector, but he didn't expect the subsequent rewards to surprise him so much that he almost jumped up. This system is so good, I love you so much. Chapter 32. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The system seemed to hear Zhang Rui's praise, and its charming electronic sound filled Zhang Rui's ears. It is the responsibility of this system to serve the host, and more functions will be provided to the host in the future. Everything is to make the host have a comfortable experience. This system is really user-friendly. There will be more functions in the future. Although I don't know what they are, I can still look forward to it. Just after Zhang Rui heard the system's words, he nodded. He was very satisfied with the system's answer. Next, let's learn about the functions of these rewards. Zhang Rui opened the warehouse and first took out the Intermediate Water Spirit Detector to see its function through the data. Intermediate Water Spirit Detector, within a radius of 100 meters, turn on the detector to find water spirits with a race value below 550. Note, water beasts will not appear in it, please don't have any illusions. Originally, Zhang Rui was still a little happy when he saw the water spirit detector. As long as there are water spirits nearby, it can detect its location. This will make it much easier for Zhang Rui to capture elves in the future, and he doesn't have to worry about the water elves running away. But after seeing the annotation, although Zhang Rui felt a little uncomfortable, he could accept it. After all, this is only an intermediate detector, and there will be advanced ones later. If the intermediate level can locate the mythical beast, then is there any meaning for the advanced level to exist? However, this detector is not yet useful in Zhang Rui's hands. He is thinking that when he challenges the Carlos copy, Zhang Rui will use this detector to capture a quack frog. After all, he has always hoped that he can complete super evolution without the evolution keystone like Xiaoji, and the power of the skills will change with the degree of bond between people and elves, which is amazing. But it is too early to think about the future now. Now we should be down to earth and work hard to improve our strength. Then, Zhang Rui put the intermediate water elf detector back into the warehouse. He wanted to take out the Hualan Four Sisters summoning scroll to take a look, but Zhang Rui thought that he had to go to class tomorrow morning, and he couldn't sleep on the first day of class. But he still couldn't suppress his curiosity and took the Hualan Four Sisters summoning scroll out of the warehouse. Hualan Four Sisters summoning scroll, you can permanently summon the Hualan Four Sisters to provide help. Note, after summoning the Hualan Four Sisters, the favorability will be full, and the host's memory will be retained. The host will agree to anything they ask them to do. His eyes swept across the system panel in front of him until he saw the last sentence, and an excited expression instantly appeared on his face. This is simply so cool. You can do anything, what a tempting word. I would like to call the system a god, it's so exciting. Zhang Rui clenched the Hualan Four Sisters summoning scroll in his hand, fearing that it would fall to the ground and get dirty, and it would not look good when summoned. Although Zhang Rui wanted to summon the Hualan Four Sisters now and get on good terms with them, it would take a lot of time. After all, Zhang Rui had to consider talking to them and where they should live. More importantly, he still has to go to class tomorrow. If he doesn't go to bed, he will definitely not be able to get up tomorrow. There was no way. Zhang Rui looked at the summoning scroll in his hand for a few times, and he could only harden his heart and put it back into the warehouse. He prepared a little, gave the Kabutosaurus some energy cubes, looked at the Kabutosaurus's satisfied expression, turned back to the soft big bed, and fell asleep as soon as he closed his eyes. Time came to the classroom of the next day. Zhang Rui lay on the table, looking at everything in front of him listlessly. Although the surrounding environment was very noisy, Zhang Rui thought these were all wonderful lullabies. He believed that as long as he lay on the table for a second, he would fall asleep directly. Brother, what's wrong with you? Why are you listless? I dated Miss Nasha so late yesterday, and I didn't feel tired yet. Seeing that Zhang Rui's mental state was still very bad, Yi Fei turned around to ask about the situation. In order to ask better, Yi Fei still poked Zhang Rui's arm with his hand. You didn't do anything yesterday, and you were so listless. If I hadn't called you in the morning, you probably wouldn't have woken up this afternoon. Tell me, what did you do yesterday? Hearing Yi Fei's question, Zhang Rui didn't want to pay any attention. Now he just wanted to lie on the table and continue sleeping, enjoying a good sleep life. Seeing that Zhang Rui was so sleepy that he didn't even have time to reply, Yi Fei had to give up and turn to chat with the girl next to him. In the noisy classroom, Yan Ling, wearing a teacher's uniform, walked in with a textbook in her hand. She stood on the podium and scanned the students in class. She found that all the students were there, so she nodded, but she looked at Zhang Rui a few times and found that Zhang Rui seemed to be a little out of shape. His eyes kept turning and his head kept falling down. She thought. I haven't started teaching yet. Why is he so sleepy? If I teach, he will lie down directly. So Yan Ling asked Zhang Rui to stand up and listen to the class first, so that he could recover his spirit before sitting down. After Zhang Rui stood up, he felt that he seemed to be in a much better spirit, so he chose to stand and listen to the class. Yan Ling also started to give a lecture. She first picked up the chalk on the table and wrote down the main content of today's lecture on the blackboard. Then she turned around and began to explain to the students present. At this time, Zhang Rui felt that he was no longer sleepy, so he sat in his seat to listen to the class, but he only listened for a minute, and Zhang Rui felt a strong sleepiness coming. Zhang Rui really couldn't help it, so he lay down on the seat and fell asleep. At this time, Yan Ling saw Zhang Rui sleeping on the table and wanted to wake him up, but then she thought that Zhang Rui must have trained the elves too late yesterday, which led to his exhaustion. She could only turn a blind eye and pretend not to see it. Suddenly, when Yan Ling was giving a climax of the lecture, she suddenly heard a very strong snoring. Many classmates were shocked by the sound, and they all turned their heads to look at Zhang Rui lying on the table, and couldn't help but admire him in their hearts. It's worthy of being the first place in the newcomer competition. Even the snoring is so loud. At this time, Yan Ling couldn't bear it anymore, so she asked Yi Fei to wake Zhang Rui up. Since it was Teacher Yan's order, Yi Fei had to do it, and pushed Zhang Rui's body with his hand. Zhang Rui woke up from his dream after feeling the impact, looked up at Yan Ling on the podium, and said, "Is the get out of class over?" Zhang Rui's confused voice made the students in the class laugh. Yan Ling also covered her forehead helplessly, pointed at Zhang Rui in the distance and said, "Zhang Rui, stand up and answer this question." Because Zhang Rui violated the classroom discipline, Yan Ling had no choice but to call him up and answer the question. In fact, it was mainly to establish authority for the classmates, and also to make Zhang Rui more sober. After all, in her class, she had to give him face. How many variant forms does Meow Meow have? Chapter 33. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Rui did not answer immediately after hearing Yan Ling's words, mainly because he was still a little confused. How could such a simple question be asked? Is this really a course taught in the university? Just as Zhang Rui was about to answer, he heard Yi Fei whispering to Zhang Rui. Meow Meow has 2 forms. The voice was very low, but because Zhang Rui and Yi Fei were very close, he could still hear what Yi Fei was saying. Zhang Rui was a little confused, so he answered Teacher Yan. 3. Meow Meow has 3 forms of variation. After hearing Zhang Rui's answer, many classmates were laughing under the table. Meow Meow has 2 forms, but Zhang Rui actually said 3. Teacher Yan gave him such a simple question and he couldn't answer it correctly. Wrong answer, there are 2 forms of Meow Meow. One is the normal form of Meow Meow, and the other is Meow Meow with evil attributes. You answered wrong, you will have to stand up and listen to the class. You are not allowed to sit down without my permission. But Zhang Rui answered firmly, Meow Meow has 3 variant forms, and the 3rd form has steel attributes. The bristles all over the body will continue to expand and harden, like a piece of black iron, and the gold coin on the forehead will become darker and harder. Zhang Rui believes that Meow Meow has 3 forms, and even casually said the appearance and attributes of the 3rd form, just to make Teacher Yan believe that this form of Meow Meow is real. Hearing Zhang Rui's detailed answer, Teacher Yan was a little stunned, but the textbook only wrote 2 forms, and there was absolutely no 3rd form. Just as Teacher Yan wanted to explain her point of view, a classmate not far from her took out his mobile phone from his body, found a photo, and asked Teacher Yan to come and take a look. Teacher, is this the kind of Pokémon Zhang Rui is talking about? After saying that, he took the photo in his hand and showed it to Teacher Yan. When the teacher saw it for the first time, the Pokémon in the photo was really similar to the one Zhang Rui described. Not only that, this Pokémon also looked very similar to Meowth, especially the gold coin on its forehead, which was black. Afterwards, he asked Zhang Rui with the photo in his hand. Zhang Rui took a look and answered affirmatively, yes, it is in this form. After getting Zhang Rui's affirmation, he turned around and asked the classmate, where did you find this Pokémon? My grandfather hatched this Pokémon from an egg. At first, he thought it was a new type of Pokémon, so he wanted me to take the photo to the Trainer Association to ask. However, since Zhang Rui answered this question and said that this Pokémon is Meowth, I don't have to go again. After listening to the student's answer, Teacher Yan nodded. It seems that she did misunderstand Zhang Rui. However, how could Zhang Rui know the 3 forms of Meowth, which made her confused? She was mainly surprised by Zhang Rui's knowledge. As a teacher, she only knew 2 forms of Meow Meow, but Zhang Rui knew the rare 3rd form. Perhaps this is what an excellent student should do. Okay. Your point of view is right this time, sit down. Since Zhang Rui's answer was right, Teacher Yan did not embarrass Zhang Rui and let him sit and listen to the class. At the same time, he echoed, you can sleep, but you can't snore. After that, Teacher Yan continued to lecture. Zhang Rui supported his chin with his hand, looked at the white letters on the blackboard, and yawned. After answering the questions just now, Zhang Rui was no longer sleepy, and he knew what Teacher Yan said before he crossed over, so he didn't need to listen to the lecture at all. Ring. I don't know how long it took, the bell for the end of get out of class finally rang. Teacher Yan looked at the time and announced to the students who wanted to leave quickly, I announced that our school will have an exchange competition with other schools. I don't know who will participate at that time. You all prepare in advance, conduct special training for your elves, and enhance your strength. This is not only for you, but also for the glory of our school. After Teacher Yan announced, he got up and left the classroom. Just as Zhang Rui was thinking about going back to the dormitory to take a nap, he was grabbed by Yi Fei. Brother, don't rush to leave. I'm so sleepy, let me go back and sleep. Zhang Rui wanted to break free and leave the classroom, but Yi Fei held on and said seriously, the school will hold an exchange competition in a few days. The school will definitely send the top 3 of our rookie competition to challenge other colleges. So, in order to cope with the exchange competition, I want you to accompany me. How about going to Shanghai Forest for a special training? Originally, Zhang Rui wanted to go back to sleep, but when he heard the word Shanghai Forest, he suddenly thought of the ultimate cave he saw above Shanghai Forest the day before yesterday, and he immediately became interested. It happened that during the special training in Shanghai Forest, he went there to check the situation. This kind of ultimate cave may not appear once in decades, but it has appeared frequently in the past few days, and the time it exists is actually increasing. There is definitely something fishy here. In order to satisfy his curiosity, Zhang Rui agreed to Yi Fei's request, and the two agreed to go to Shanghai Forest for special training together the next morning. After that, Yi Fei let go of Zhang Rui's hand, and Zhang Rui ate a little in the cafeteria, then ran to the dormitory, summoned Kabutosaurus, and fed it some energy cubes, which also raised Kabutosaurus's level again. It has reached level 32. If it is an ordinary 3 family, it can finally evolve after a few more levels, but Kabutosaurus still needs more than 10 levels. This is still a long process and needs to be cultivated slowly. Watching Kabutosaurus eating energy cubes so happily, Zhang Rui lay on the bed, closed his eyes and fell asleep. When he woke up again, it was already 8 o'clock in the evening, which was past dinner time. Sure enough, you can't stay up late. Zhang Rui got up and complained, then took out some fruit from the warehouse, dealt with it casually, and then clicked to enter the small world. Since he passed through the evergreen forest, he has not yet subdued the elves there, and all of them exist in the small world. Now, Zhang Rui just has time to tidy up his small world. When Zhang Rui came to the small world, looking at the dense jungle around him and the fruit on the trees, he felt a full sense of pride in his heart. It is worthy of being the world he created. It is because the world is too big that Zhang Rui wants to go to find the elves he put into the small world. He had to search in the forest. Fortunately, he had the ability to manage the small world. As long as he closed his eyes, he could sense the location of the elves. Zhang Rui quickly located the location of the giant bee, turned around and ran over, and saw several giant bee playing there. When they were hungry, they ate a few fruits from the trees. In addition to that top-quality giant bee, there are so many giant bee. I remember that only one giant bee was put into the small world, so the other giant bee wouldn't be its children. Do all insect-type elves reproduce so quickly? Chapter 34. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At this moment, Zhang Rui suddenly thought of something. In the dungeon, he put a lot of excellent iron shell pupae into the small world. It has been so long, and they should have evolved into giant bees by now, so why are there so many giant bees? This question is solved. I thought it was the offspring of this giant bee. Come to think of it, there is only one giant bee, and it is impossible for it to give birth to a second giant bee in a few years, mainly because the gender of this giant bee is male. Have you ever seen a male produce the next generation? However, since these iron shell pupae have completed their evolution, the metal-armored pupae on the other side should also have completed their evolution. After all, these elves were put in at the same time. Even if they have just evolved into pupae not long ago, these few days are enough. Zhang Rui closed his eyes to perceive the whole world. Sure enough, he found several butterfree eating fruits on the tree not far away. Even the little rattata he had captured was lying in the pile of fruits, taking a bite when hungry, and it was obvious that it had begun to gain weight. Zhang Rui's purpose of entering the small world this time was to capture all these elves into the elf ball, because after these elves were captured, they would be a little more obedient, so that they would not forget him after a few days of not seeing him. Since the giant bee was very close to Zhang Rui went to capture those giant bee first, but just in case, Zhang Rui summoned the Kabutosaurus first. In case the giant bee attacked him, the presence of Kabutosaurus would make it safer. Just as Zhang Rui walked in front of these giant bee, the giant bee that was playing raised its 2 needles and rushed towards Zhang Rui at the first sight of Zhang Rui. Just when it was about to hit Zhang Rui, a dragon-shaped phantom rushed in and knocked the giant bee away, hitting it heavily on the tree, and it was obvious that it had lost its combat ability. Sure enough. It's right to let the Kabutosaurus come out to protect me. Zhang Rui patted his chest, took a few breaths, and then looked at the giant bees under the tree. if you weren't so talented, I would have thrown you out of the small world long ago. After that, he took out some Pokeballs he bought from the warehouse and subdued these giant bees one by one. After that, Zhang Rui found the rest of the elves in the forest. Without a fierce battle, these elves were not as brutal as the giant bees. Instead, after seeing Zhang Rui, they came to him and voluntarily entered the Pokeball. In fact, it was because the Kabutosaurus followed them. Seeing such a powerful elf, they became timid in their hearts and chose to give in. Although all these elves were subdued into the Pokeball, Zhang Rui would not keep putting them in, but let them be released again, let them live freely in the forest. After all, it is a waste to let so many highly qualified elves survive in the outside world. Moreover, after the elves with high qualifications mate with the elves with ordinary qualifications, the qualifications of the next generation will definitely decline. Since the elves in the small world are almost all of the best qualifications, the qualifications of their offspring will only be higher, and they can even compete with the qualifications of the divine beasts. After the elves were arranged, Zhang Rui found a good place in the small world. This place is very close to the lake, and there is a desert not far away, so let's choose this place. After speaking, Zhang Rui waved his hand, and the originally flat land suddenly had something glowing breaking out of the ground. It slowly changed. First the height gradually increased, until it grew to several hundred meters, and began to increase the width. As it slowly extended, it finally became the shape of a castle. There are at least hundreds of rooms in this kind of castle, and there is a huge living room in the middle. Of course, all the necessary equipment is also available. Zhang Rui looked at the castle he built and nodded with satisfaction. It's worthy of me. Who else can build such a magnificent castle besides me? Now that the castle has been built, let's welcome its real owner. Zhang Rui opened the system panel, took out the Hualan Four Sisters summoning scroll from the warehouse, and clicked the use button. The summoning scroll turned into a white light and slowly landed on the ground. Four beautiful girls instantly appeared in front of Zhang Rui. Seeing the beautiful face in front of him, Zhang Rui was very excited at this time. He didn't expect that this summoning scroll could summon 4 girls at once. This is so cool. Sakura in the distance first looked at the surrounding environment, obviously feeling a little unfamiliar. When he saw Zhang Rui's handsome face, his eyes lit up and smiled. Zhang Rui, right. We meet again. You will be our master in the future. Please give us more advice in the future. After hearing Sakura's words, Zhang Rui was a little puzzled. Why would Sakura say such a thing? Regardless, no matter how Zhang Rui thought about it, he attributed it to the intimacy. After all, the effect of maxing out the intimacy was amazing. After that, Arceus, Peony, and Xiaoxia all greeted Zhang Rui. Zhang Rui saw the fair-skinned and beautiful woman in front of him, and couldn't help but smile wickedly, saying to them, "Here is where you will live in the future. And your only job is to check the status of the elves in the forest every day. The rest of the time, you are free to do whatever you want." Hearing Zhang Rui say this, the 4 women were obviously disappointed and frowned. Obviously, Zhang Rui's behavior did not satisfy them. But this was Zhang Rui's words after all, so they could only agree. After settling the 4 Hualan sisters, Zhang Rui turned and went into the castle, and put the elf ball containing the elves in the small world in a room. Everything has been arranged. Zhang Rui has collected a lot of tree fruits in this small world, and is ready to take them to the outside world to make some energy blocks. The energy blocks last time were almost used up, and this time Zhang Rui plans to make some more. After returning to the dormitory, Zhang Rui started to make energy blocks, and soon made a lot of energy blocks. So many energy blocks should be enough for the Kabutosaurus to eat for a long time. After that, Zhang Rui looked at the time again. It was already past 10 o'clock. He thought about going to bed after 11 o'clock. At this time, he remembered that he had not explored the Yuejian Mountain dungeon yet, so he opened the Yuejian Mountain dungeon and prepared to go to Yuejian Mountain to see if he could meet any high-quality elves. In the empty room, a black vortex suddenly appeared in front of Zhang Rui, but he didn't think much and walked in directly. When Zhang Rui opened his eyes again, what appeared in front of him was a mountain range with many caves. It seemed that this was Yuejian Mountain. Chapter 35. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Moon Mountain is surrounded by dense forests. Suddenly, a breeze blew and the forest made a rustling sound. Zhang Rui walked to the cave in front of him and stretched his head to look inside. It was pitch black inside and there were horrible sounds from time to time. If Zhang Rui didn't know that it was the Moon Mountain Cave, he would not want to come here even if he died. However, he did not enter the exploration immediately. Instead, he guessed the meaning of the system. After defeating the Nibi Jim, he gave him the Banjira's detector. Was it hinting to him that Banjira's was here? Although he was not sure, he still took out the detector to try it. After all, for such things, it is better to believe it than not to believe it. Zhang Rui first opened the warehouse interface and took out the Banjira's detector from it. The detector in his hand is like a disc with a blue hard material in the middle. I don't know what it is for. And the edge of this disc should be the switch of the detector. As long as it is pressed, it should be able to detect whether there is Banjira's around. Zhang Rui did not wait, but pressed the red button on the disc. As the red button was pressed, the blue hard material in the middle of the disc was flashing blue light. Zhang Rui thought that the machine was detecting the surrounding environment. After the blue light flashed 3 times, it stopped flashing. Zhang Rui turned his head and looked around. Nothing happened. Could it be that there was no Banjira's around, or even its evolution? Since there was no Banjira's, let's go see if there are any elves with high qualifications here. Zhang Rui picked up the detector on the ground and was about to put it in the warehouse when he saw that the blue material in the detector was emitting dazzling light again. Then, the blue light continued to spread until a plane map was formed, and there was a flashing red light spot at a certain position in the plane map, which was constantly moving. Such high technology. I'm afraid that there is no such technology in the elf world, and I don't know where the system got it from. It can actually display the topographic map of 100 miles through projection. Zhang Rui looked at the detector in his hand and exclaimed in his heart. Then, Zhang Rui began to study, and after a few minutes, he finally knew the effect of the detection. Among them, the projected terrain represents the terrain within 100 miles around Zhang Rui, and the constantly moving red dot in the middle should be Banjira's, but looking over, the red dot is constantly moving. What is this Banjira's doing? Is it playing with its companions? This is unknown, but it is certain that Banjira's does exist in Yuejian Mountain. After that, Zhang Rui roughly planned the terrain according to the topographic map and found that he had to cross the cave in front of him. Looking at the dark cave in front of him, Zhang Rui still has some understanding of the environment inside and the elves living in it. There should be elves like Zubat or Paras living in it, but there are no street lights set up by the rocket team. Think about it, after all, it has been so long, and the street lights should have been removed by the researcher long ago. However, before entering, you should prepare a flashlight. In the dark cave, it is difficult to see the route without a flashlight. If someone attacks you from behind, you may not know who did it. However, Zhang Rui did not choose to leave the cave, but summoned the Kabutosaurus first, and let it gather the flames in its mouth and keep it burning. It was indeed a bit hard for the Kabutosaurus to do this, but it was also a special training for it, specifically training its ability to control the flames. After hearing Zhang Rui's order, the Kabutosaurus began to gather the flames in its mouth. Because it was the first time, it quickly collapsed after gathering a little, but the Kabutosaurus did not give up. After several failures, it finally gathered the flames in its mouth and kept it for a long time without being extinguished. Since the Kabutosaurus had completed the gathering of flames in its mouth, Zhang Rui did not stay at the entrance of the cave for long, but followed the Kabutosaurus into the cave. As soon as they entered the cave, it was pitch black all around. Fortunately, with the flames of the Kabutosaurus, they could roughly see the route and not get lost. After they walked for a few minutes, Zhang Rui found a faint blue light in the distance, and he was immediately confused. This blue light reminded Zhang Rui of the moonstone. Could it be that the blue light in front of him was emitted by the moonstone? In order to answer the doubts, Zhang Rui led the Kabutosaurus towards the blue light. After walking through a dark space, a bright road came into view. Zhang Rui's guess was correct. This stone emitting blue light, it is the moonstone. At this time, these moonstones are embedded in the wall, and the blue light emitted by the moonstone is used to illuminate the entire cave. Because white light will harm the elves in the cave, it will cause them to have mental problems and become depressed, but the moonstone is different. The light it emits can not only make the entire cave bright, so that the trainers passing by can walk out of the cave well, but more importantly, it does not cause any harm to the elves living in the cave. On the contrary, these elves like to live here. Zhang Rui is not a person with intentions. He took down all the moonstones embedded in the wall, but asked the Kabutosaurus beside to stop gathering the flames and let it rest for a while. Then he took it along the direction where the moonstones were lined up and walked into the cave. Although he met many paras on the way, none of them had qualifications above a level. Most of them were C level, or even D level, and only a few were B level qualifications, but this qualification less than a level is still too low for Zhang Rui, so he can only pretend to ignore it and pass by them. Soon they came to a fork in the road. In order to determine the direction, Zhang Rui took out the detector again and found that the distance from Banjiras was getting longer. Why is it getting farther and farther? Is there something chasing it? Looking at the red dot moving in front of him, Zhang Rui didn't pay much attention, but used the topographic map in front of him to find the direction to go out. According to the position of the red dot, he quickly determined the direction of the route, which was to go to the left. After determining the route, he took back the detector and continued to move forward. Just after walking a few steps, he found that the wall was full of blue things. Looking carefully, there were all Zubats in front of him. So many, however, they were sleeping, and Zhang Rui didn't want to provoke them, but tried to pass by here slowly and silently. Thinking about it, Zhang Rui was very curious. Among so many Zubats, is there one with very high qualifications? The Kabutops on the side hurriedly bit Zhang Rui's trouser leg and asked him to leave quickly. If so many Zubats were beaten up, there would be no chance of escape. Zhang Rui looked down at the Kabutosaurus in front of him, not knowing what it was worried about. The level of these Zubats was not high, only half of its level, so what was there to be afraid of? Then, Zhang Rui opened the data eye to scan the data of the Zubats one by one, but soon showed a disappointed expression. Why are they all C level or B level? Aren't there any good qualifications? Just when Zhang Rui wanted to give up the scan and choose to leave, he suddenly saw a Zubat with excellent qualifications from a larger Zubat. Chapter 36. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Name, Zubat, Overlord Pokemon. Attributes, Poison/Flying, Level, LV16, Quality, S, Gender, Male, Status, Hibernation, Features, Mental Power, Items carried, None, Inherited moves, Surprise Attack, Wind, Lightning Flash, Steel Wings, Basic Skills, Absorb, Ultrasonic, Scare, Bite, Wing Attack. Skills taught, Tailwind, Angry Fangs, Skills secrets, None. This Zubat is too good, and it's even an Overlord Pokemon. Especially the skills it learned, it's the best of the best, I must definitely subdue it. After Zhang Rui looked at the data through the data eye, he said excitedly in his heart. Then, he opened the system warehouse, took out a Pokeball from it, and looked at the Overlord level Zubat, and slowly used the white button of the Pokeball to touch its body. Just when the white button was about to be touched, the Zubat suddenly turned around and bumped into Zhang Rui, who was using a Pokeball to capture it. Seeing that the Zubat in front of him had woken up, Zhang Rui immediately felt bad, but since it had discovered it, he would just throw the ball to capture it. Zhang Rui threw the Pokeball in his hand, but how could a highly qualified Pokemon be captured so easily? Seeing the Pokeball touching it, the Zubat flapped its wings and flew up. As the frequency of the wings flapped, a white blade emerged from the wings, hitting the Pokeball in front of it and knocking it out. This was obviously a wing attack by the Zubat. As the Pokeball fell, the Zubat emitted a strong ultrasonic wave, and Zhang Rui immediately covered his ears with his hands to reduce the interference of the ultrasonic wave. Obviously, the Zubat was angry. After all, someone used a Pokeball to capture it while it was sleeping, which could easily make it angry. The sound of the ultrasonic wave swept the entire cave, and a large number of Zubats woke up from sleep and prepared to attack Zhang Rui. Looking at the Zubats surrounding him, Zhang Rui gave an order to Kabutosaurus. Kabutosaurus, there is nothing to be afraid of these bats. Are you ready to attack? Roar. Kabutosaurus looked at the Zubats in the air, and his fighting spirit was extremely high. The Zubats in front of him were just a group of scum. As long as he made a random move, he could defeat them. Now he was waiting for Zhang Rui's order. Kabutosaurus, get ready. At this time, Kabutosaurus looked at the Zubats flying in the cave, as if he was promoting the failure of the Zubats. Escape. After Zhang Rui finished speaking, he turned around and ran to the depths of the cave, and Kabutosaurus was also a little confused at this time. Roar, damn trainer, you actually deceived my feelings. Just after Kabutosaurus roared, he turned around and followed Zhang Rui to the depths of the cave. Although he would definitely be caught up soon if he ran away, he should still try. What if he could escape from these Zubats? These Zubats would not just stand there and watch. The Overlord Zubat used the ultrasonic skill again. A large number of Zubats flew over the cave and chased Zhang Rui and Kabutosaurus. So many Zubats, it's really terrible to disturb people's sleep. Zhang Rui turned his head and saw a blue sea behind him. He could not see the figure of Moonstone behind him at all. It was all Zubats. It is estimated that all the Zubats in the entire cave have been dispatched. If they are caught by them, the consequences will be unimaginable. Just as Zhang Rui continued to run forward, he saw that he was surrounded by a large number of Zubats in front of him and there was no way to go. This really leaves no way for people to survive. Zhang Rui stood in the middle of the cave. There was a group of Zubats in front of him and another group of Zubats behind him. He could no longer escape. In that case, Kabutosaurus, we really have to fight this time. Use sparks on the Zubats behind you. When facing a swarm of Beedrills, using sparks can easily defeat the opponent, but facing so many Zubats, sparks have little effect. Kabutosaurus spewed out many small flames from its mouth, sweeping towards the Zubats in front of it. Because there are so many Zubats, the flames will not miss. Although the Zubats in front of it dodge, do the Zubats behind it still have a chance to dodge? Although the power of the sparks is very low, it is released by a level 30 Kabutosaurus, which is equivalent to the jet flames spit out from the mouth of a level 20 Charmeleon. The power is still amazing. After being attacked, a large number of Zubats fell to the ground and lost their ability to fight. At the same time, Kabutosaurus's level was raised again, and the level also reached the 33rd level. Although Kabutosaurus's attack was very intensive, the Overlord Elf Zubat easily dodged it, opened its mouth and released noisy ultrasonic waves. The Zubats in front and behind received the order and all waved their thin wings, and a series of white air-breaking blades attacked Zhang Rui. Kabutosaurus, use hold. Kabutosaurus ran in front of Zhang Rui and quickly formed a green spherical barrier. The moment these white light blades hit the barrier, they were all dissipated. However, the Kabutosaurus in the barrier was unscathed, not even a little injured. Use Dragon Wave. A dragon-shaped phantom spit out of Kabutosaurus' mouth, roared to the sky, and rushed towards the group of Zubats in front of it. At this time, the Overlord Elf Zubat felt that the skills in front of it posed a great threat to it, so its wings turned into steel color and rushed towards the dragon-shaped phantom in front of it. The iron-like wings and the dragon-shaped phantom collided violently, but the power of the dragon wave was too strong, and the Overlord-level Zubat could not resist it at all and was directly knocked out. The Zubat group behind him suffered, and they were all hit by the dragon-shaped phantom, lost their combat ability, and collapsed on the ground. Since Kabutosaurus would make a large number of Zubats lose their combat ability every time it attacked, its level was raised again after this attack, reaching level 34. The Zubat group in front of him saw that the skill power released by the egg-like creature in front of them was so powerful, and they all waved their wings and fled here. Only the injured Overlord Elf was left, and Zhang Rui walked slowly to the front of the Zubat. Do you want to fight again? The Zubat lying on the ground waved its wings again, looking very unwilling to admit defeat, waving its wings, and the air blades generated attacked Kabutosaurus. Hold on. The Kabutosaurus released a green barrier again to block Zubat's attack. Dragon Breath. A strong breath came out of the Kabutosaurus' mouth. Zubat in the air was startled and tried to dodge. Suddenly, it felt pain on its right wing and was hit by the strong breath. It fell from the sky and lost its ability to fight, and Zhang Rui would not give up such a good opportunity. He took out the Pokeball again and threw it out. Chapter 37. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The Pokeball accurately hit the falling Zubat, opened its mouth and swallowed it. then slowly fell to the ground. Zhang Rui watched the shaking of the Pokeball in front of him, and almost every shaking symbolized a surprise. 1, 2. Zhang Rui muttered in his heart, and the Pokeball stopped shaking after the third time. Boom! After hearing the sound of the Pokeball rebounding, Zhang Rui knew that he had succeeded in catching it. He picked up the Pokeball on the ground, took it with him, and looked at the Zubat that had lost its combat ability. Although the qualifications of these Zubats are not comparable to this Overlord-level Pokémon, there should be Pokémon with high qualifications among them. After Zhang Rui carefully searched, he found 3 Pokémon with quality above A+, and after catching them, he put them in the warehouse. After catching Bankiras, he put all these Pokémon in the small world. Then, he took out the Pokeball containing Zubat and threw it out. The Overlord Zubat flew out of the Pokeball. It was obvious that it no longer had the hatred it had for Zhang Rui just now. Instead, it felt a sense of intimacy with Zhang Rui. This was the miraculous effect of the Pokeball. Touching Zubat's head, Zhang Rui thought that it was too slow to find the exit of the cave bit by bit through the detector. Now there was a more practical method. Zubat, use ultrasound to detect the exit of the cave. A large number of sound waves were generated in Zubat's mouth, but this time they were low-frequency sound waves. Zhang Rui could not hear the sound. After all, the skill of ultrasound could change the frequency at will by Zubat. After a while, Zubat seemed to have found the exit and flapped its wings to fly away. Zhang Rui chased after Zubat and soon came to the direction of the exit. As the trees in front of him became clearer, he could even see the Pidgeot fighting with the toucan in the air. After Zhang Rui walked out of the cave, he took back the Zubat and took out the detector to continue tracking the whereabouts of Bankiras. At this time, it found that Bankiras was getting closer to it, just to his right. What's going on? Is the machine malfunctioning? Zhang Rui looked at the topographic map in front of him, and then looked at the surrounding environment, only to see that the red dot was getting closer and closer to him, until a sound came from the forest in the distance. Zhang Rui hurriedly turned his head to look at the situation in the distance, and saw a small reptile elf with rock-like gray-green skin and a long blunt horn on its head, running towards Zhang Rui. This is young Kiras. Obviously, the elf that appeared in front of Zhang Rui was not Bankiras, but Bankiras's original form, young Kiras. Name, young Kiras. Attributes, rock/ground. Level, LV20. Quality, S+. Gender, male. Status, excited. Features, sand hiding. Carried items, none. Inherited moves, primal power, malice pursuit, curse, dragon dance, gathering chi. Basic skills, bite, stare, sandstorm, scream, gradual break, rockfall. Taught skills, power of the earth, iron head. Skill secrets, none. This is such good luck. I actually encountered a top-quality young Kiras. I will never let this top-quality elf go. Just when Zhang Rui asked the carapace dragon behind him to attack, he saw that the young Kiras was holding a full of fruit in his arms, and behind it, the elves chasing it were Nidoking and Nidoqueen, as well as some other elves. The eyes of the elves in the distance were all fierce, as if they wanted to swallow the young Kiras in one gulp and then bite it to pieces. Seeing this situation, Zhang Rui could think of why these elves chased the young Kiras. It was probably because the young Kiras stole the fruits they had collected with great effort, which led to their relentless pursuit of it. And this young Kiras was very smart. When passing in front of Zhang Rui, it seemed to think of something interesting and quickly hid behind Zhang Rui. This young Kiras is young, but he has a bad mind. He actually wants to use me as a shield. Zhang Rui looked at the young Kiras hiding behind him, with a pitiful look in his eyes, and stuffed the peach fruit in his hand into his mouth, and when the elves chasing it saw him hiding behind Zhang Rui, they surrounded Zhang Rui and did not give him a chance to escape. The leading Nidoking howled a few times at the young Kiras behind Zhang Rui. From the ears, it can be heard that the Nidoking is full of anger towards the young Kiras. After the Nidoking, the elves also roared at the young Kiras, and the petite trumpet bud tried to run to Zhang Rui's side and snatch the fruit from the young Kiras, but it was kicked away by the young Kiras. It might be that this trumpet bud was just born not long ago. After being hit by the young Kiras, it cried on the ground. At this time, the big flower next to it couldn't stand it. It dared to hit its son in front of it. This was not giving it face. It spit out a lot of sticky stuff from its mouth towards the young Kiras who was hitting Zhang Rui's trouser legs. The sticky stuff exuded a disgusting smell. If Zhang Rui was hit by this stuff, his legs would probably be corroded directly. He immediately gave a look to the armored dragon beside him. The armored dragon took a look and instantly understood what Zhang Rui meant. He quickly walked to the front of the young Kiras, opened the green protective shield, and blocked the sticky stuff in front of him. The sticky stuff was blocked by the green barrier and slowly slid down from above, corroding the plants on the ground. Young Kiras saw that the giant egg in front of him could actually block the attack of the Venus flytrap, and cast an envious look at it. At this time, many elves saw that Zhang Rui intended to protect young Kiras, so they prepared to attack it. At this moment, Zhang Rui suddenly felt bad. Although the elves in front of him had poor qualifications, their levels were not low. Each of them had a strength of more than 30 levels, especially the Nidoking, which had a level of 40. If it attacked, it would be difficult for the Kabutosaurus to stop it, so he stopped thinking about fighting them and chose the simplest reconciliation. Zhang Rui opened the warehouse, took out a large number of tree fruits, put them on the ground, and smiled. These tree fruits are my compensation to you for young Kiras. For the sake of these tree fruits, how about you let young Kiras go? Obviously, Zhang Rui's voice was very useful. Most elves chose to forgive young Kiras when they saw so many tree fruits, and then took some tree fruits and left. After receiving the fruit, many elves forgave the behavior of young Kiras, and after giving him a few warnings, they happily left with the fruit. Seeing many elves leave, Zhang Rui breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, giving them fruit could earn their forgiveness, but Nidoking and Nidoqueen did not appreciate the fruit, and they were still unyielding, pointing at Zhang Rui and shouting loudly. Nido. Chapter 38. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Rui looked at the Nido couple who were full of anger in front of him, feeling a little confused. He had given them a lot of fruit, which was twice as much as the fruit stolen by the young Kiras, but they still looked angry, and were not grateful at all for Zhang Rui giving them fruit. Weren't they angry because the fruit was stolen? Then what were they angry about? In order to know the truth of their anger, Zhang Rui suppressed his laughter and asked the Nido couple who were full of ferocious faces in front of him. What did this young Kiras do to you? You can tell me and I will help it solve it. Even if Zhang Rui had hoped to get their forgiveness for the young Kiras by making amends to the Nido couple without any conflict, after all, Zhang Rui had already determined that the young Kiras had such qualifications, and after his training, the strength of the elves in the future would probably be very strong. Although Zhang Rui kept defending the young Kiras behind him didn't take it seriously. He smiled at Zhang Rui and ran away with the fruit in his arms. Because the fruit in his arms exceeded his body size this time, most of the fruit fell from his arms to the ground. At this time, Zhang Rui saw that the meat in his mouth flew away, and was about to chase it, but was stopped by Nidoran and Nidona. The two elves roared at Zhang Rui, and their voices were so loud that they could be heard from a distance of dozens of meters. Zhang Rui looked at the elves in front of him, and couldn't help but wonder again in his heart, weren't they chasing the young Kiras? Why did they stop it and let the young Kiras leave? What kind of logic is this? Did you stop the wrong person? Young Kiras has already run away. Let's chase him together. Nido King did not listen to what Zhang Rui said. A large amount of energy gathered into a huge ball in his mouth. The ball continued to gather in Nido King's mouth, and a beam of light quickly attacked Zhang Rui. Destruction Death Light. What are these two elves doing? He is also a victim. Although Zhang Rui had a lot of doubts in his heart, he still solved the elves in front of him first. Kabutosaurus, hold on. Kabutosaurus quickly came to Zhang Rui and looked at the upcoming energy beam. It did not rush to open the huge green protective shield, covering Zhang Rui behind it. The huge protective shield and the energy beam collided violently, and the powerful energy made the surrounding flowers and plants stretch to both sides. However, the green protective shield was still better, blocking all the energy beams, and Zhang Rui behind him was not hurt at all. Nido King needs to buffer for a while after using a skill before he can continue to use it. At this time, Nidoqueen, whose whole body was light blue, attacked from the side. Her arms were covered by white light, and she punched Kabutosaurus, brick-breaking. Kabutosaurus dodged Nidoqueen's fist. Kabutosaurus' body quickly shifted to one side, and just when Nidoqueen's fist was about to be hit, Kabutosaurus' body happened to dodge Nidoqueen's attack. Nidoqueen's fist hit the ground under Kabutosaurus' feet, and it exploded directly as if a landmine was buried on the ground. Seeing two elves with higher levels than Kabutosaurus besieging him, Zhang Rui did not continue to order Kabutosaurus, but said to it, "I will no longer command this battle, the rest depends on you. I am only responsible for shouting and cheering on the side." In fact, this was also Zhang Rui's sudden idea. Kabutosaurus needs to listen to Zhang Rui's instructions every time it fights, but he himself has lost the ability to think. If Zhang Rui and Kabutosaurus are separated one day, how should it deal with the enemy in front of it? Therefore, we should cultivate the awareness of self-fighting of Kabutosaurus from now on, so that Zhang Rui can relax a little and not worry about commanding the battle all the time, which will cause dry mouth and tongue. Hearing that Zhang Rui would no longer command it, Kabutosaurus was still a little panicked at first. After all, it had never fought alone, but it was soon relieved because it also wanted to try how much strength it could exert by itself. Nidoking in front of him needed to recover for a while after using the destruction death ray. Kabutosaurus found an opportunity, spit out a dragon-shaped phantom from his mouth, and rushed towards Nidoking at a very fast speed. Nidoking currently had no way to release skills, and could only rely on his body to block the dragon-shaped phantom in front of him, but he did not expect that the power of this dragon-shaped phantom was so great that it directly repelled it to the tree trunk behind him. The force generated by the impact on the tree trunk caused all the green leaves on the tree to fall down, surrounding Nidoking like a snowman. At this time, Nidoqueen was also somewhat surprised. The Kabutosaurus in front of him had such a powerful force that he could directly push back the level 40 Nidoking by dozens of meters, but he could not be surprised. His fist was wrapped in fiercely burning flames, and he attacked the Kabutosaurus in front of him with lightning speed. Kabutosaurus had noticed Nidoqueen's attack long ago, and immediately propped up a green barrier to block Nidoqueen's flaming fist. As the flames on Nidoqueen's fist gradually extinguished, the green barrier in front of Kabutosaurus also gradually disappeared, but Kabutosaurus would not stand there, opening its mouth and revealing sharp teeth with blazing flames burning on its teeth. The flames continued to burn on its teeth, but Kabutosaurus did not feel any pain, opened its flaming teeth, and bit Nidoqueen. Nidoqueen's cry startled Nidoking, who was buried under the leaves, and he immediately stood up and pushed away the leaves on his body, rushing towards Kabutosaurus as if he was risking his life. Its purple horn was covered by green light, forming a huge sharp horn, and it rushed straight towards the Kabutosaurus. Super Horn Attack. This is a very powerful skill among the insect skills. I didn't expect that Nidoking actually learned it. Zhang Rui was stunned and a little surprised when he saw Nidoking use Super Horn Attack, but soon calmed down. If the Kabutosaurus he trained can't deal with two elves, then it's all in vain. The Kabutosaurus noticed that Nidoking was approaching it, but it didn't worry. Instead, it opened its mouth and held up a green barrier to resist Nidoking's horn attack. Nidoqueen had been bitten by the flame fang attack of the Kabutosaurus just now, and there were traces of burns on the place where it was bitten. It was obvious that the injury was very serious. Come to think of it, Kabutosaurus is fed with physical attacks every day. How can the damage of physical attacks not be high? After seeing the injuries on Nidoking's body, Nidoking became even more angry, and the sharp horns on his head became stronger, hitting the green barrier held up by Kabutops with a strong momentum. The skill effect of defending is there, no matter how powerful your attack is, as long as the power is not the kind that crosses several levels, it can be resisted by you. Chapter 39. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The light on Nidoking's horn attack gradually dissipated. Kabutosaurus chose not to waste time and directly cancelled the green protective shield. His body was quickly wrapped in blue-purple energy, and his body turned into a body like a dragon god. Because Kabutosaurus retracted his skills, Nidoking lost his support, his body tilted outward a little, and even lost his footing, but at this time, Kabutosaurus's attack was already in place, and Nidoking could not resist such a close-range attack at all. Kabutosaurus's attack was about to hit Nidoking. At this time, Nidoqueen suddenly rushed out and quickly blocked in front of Nidoking, but she underestimated the damage of Kabutosaurus and directly knocked Nidoqueen and Nidoking behind her out. The power this time cannot be compared with the Dragon Wave. The power of the Dragon God's dive can be said to be twice that of the Dragon Wave, not to mention the close-range resistance attack. The Nido couple hit the hard giant tree again, but it was not as simple as just hitting it directly, but it broke directly, and it stopped only when the third giant tree came. Due to the impact just now, Nidoqueen collapsed on the ground and lost her ability to fight, and Nidoking was also seriously injured, but still able to fight. However, it did not continue to fight, but came to Nidoqueen's side, quickly picked it up, and looked at it with a deep expression. Seeing such a miserable scene, Zhang Rui did not let Kabutosaurus continue to attack, but let it take the fruit and hand it to Nidoking. Let it take it to Nidoqueen. Kabutosaurus received the order and did not continue to attack. At this time, Nidoking looked at Nidoqueen, who had lost her ability to fight, and it regretted why it provoked the trainer. At this moment, it found that the Kabutosaurus was coming from a distance. Nidoking showed a fierce look on his face again, guarding in front of Nidoqueen, and gathered a lot of energy in his mouth again, as if he wanted to fight a desperate battle with the Kabutosaurus. The Kabutosaurus was getting closer and closer, and the yellow light ball in Nidoking's mouth was getting bigger and bigger. This attack gathered all its energy, and the Kabutosaurus could never withstand such a powerful attack. Seeing that the Kabutosaurus was getting closer and closer to it, Nidoking could no longer bear it, and a burst of energy rushed towards the Kabutosaurus. Facing the yellow energy in front of him, the Kabutosaurus slowly propped up the green barrier and easily resisted Nidoking's destructive death light again. After Nidoking used the destructive death light, it took a long time to recover. When it saw that the last attack was ineffective, it was already discouraged, but at this time, the Kabutosaurus was still moving forward, and every step it took was a bad news for Nidoking. Now it could run away, abandon Nidoqueen and choose to leave. With its strength, it could find a new Nidoqueen in the future, but it didn't, because it loved the Nidoqueen in front of it and didn't want to lose it, so it stretched out its arms and desperately protected Nidoqueen. When the Kabutosaurus came in front of it, it wanted to fight again, but it had no strength, sat on the ground, and lost the ability to resist. The Kabutosaurus put the fruit in its mouth in front of Nidoking, looked at Nidoking affectionately, and turned around and left here. With Zhang Rui, only Nidoking was left with a confused look. After the Kabutosaurus came back, Zhang Rui took out the Bagheera's detector again and detected the location of Bagheera's again. The battle just lasted too long, and Zhang Rui couldn't find the location of young Kira's at all. Although the fruit falling on the ground could see the specific direction of young Kira's, when chasing after it for a distance, the falling fruit could not be seen. This also led to the disappearance of the young Kira's, but it was also the reason why Zhang Rui took out the detector to look for it. Instead of wandering around, it would be more practical to use the detector to find it. Through the location marked on the detector, Zhang Rui looked up at the surrounding environment and determined that the young Kira's was in the cave not far away. After learning the whereabouts of the young Kira's, Zhang Rui took the Kabutosaurus to chase him and soon came to the cave entrance marked by the detector. At the entrance of the cave, there were many pink elves playing around. One of them took a piece of fruit from the cave and ate it outside, eating with relish. "There are so many Pippi here, why did the young Kira's run here?" Zhang Rui saw Pippi's figure from a distance and was a little confused, but he got up and walked into the cave. On the way, he did not forget to check Pippi's qualifications and catch any Pippi with good qualifications. Although Zhang Rui was not very interested in elves like Pippi, there were naturally people in the small world who liked this cute elf. Zhang Rui, when he came to the entrance of the cave, he sighed. None of these Pippi had any talent that impressed him. They were all ordinary. For an S-level talent like Zubat, it was a gift from God to have one among 1,000 elves. At this time, the Pippi surrounded Zhang Rui, as if welcoming his arrival. Zhang Rui smiled slightly and walked into the cave. The inside of the cave was just a huge rock cave. There were huge stones on the table in the middle. There were more Pippis around, dancing magically. Zhang Rui, who had just entered the cave, immediately noticed the young Kira's. It was sitting on the ground playing with Pixie next to it, and from time to time it took out the fruit from the tree behind it to share with Pixie. It seems that Pixie is a friend of young Kira's. Name, Pixie, Overlord Elf, Attribute, Fairy, Level, LV25, quality, S, gender, female, status, happy, features, charming body, carrying items, none, inherited moves, instant frustration, aromatherapy, healing waves, auxiliary power, prayer, basic skills, spotlight, charming voice, singing, continuous slaps, smaller, waving, rounder, look at me, missing UN gift, wake up slap, act like a spoiled child, angel's kiss, teaching skills, ice fist, flame fist, lightning fist, skills. And secrets, none. This pixie is too strong. Except for the difference in level, the other attributes are almost all top-notch, especially the moves it has learned, at least a dozen. I really doubt its brain capacity. How can it remember so many skills? As usual, Zhang Rui took the lead in opening the data eye to check the data of the Pokémon in front of him. He felt like Xiaoji, who liked to take out the Pokémon encyclopedia to check the status of the Pokémon. At this moment, young Kira seemed to notice Zhang Rui's arrival, and his face was full of surprise. It was obviously hidden very well, and others would never find it, but the boy in front of him found it so easily. Chapter 40. You are listening at novelfull.audio. However, the young Kira's was very smart and soon figured out the purpose of Zhang Rui's coming. If he didn't covet his body, what else could he covet? He stood up quickly and hid behind Pixie, hoping that Pixie could help him deal with Zhang Rui, and he would sneak away quietly. Zhang Rui stood not far from Pixie, watching the young Kira's trying to sneak away from him. Zhang Rui naturally would not let him escape again, so he asked the Kabutosaurus beside him to block him. When the young Kira's was about to escape, the Kabutosaurus blocked him at a very fast speed, showing a condescending expression, but Zhang Rui didn't know that the young Kira's was so timid. He glanced at the Kabutosaurus in front of him and thought that the Kabutosaurus had such a terrifying strength to resist the Nido couple on its own. He ran behind Pixie again, hoping that Pixie would help him. At this time, Pixie would not sit idly by. She immediately stood up and began to wave her tiny fingers. It seemed that there was energy gathering in her fingers. As the energy gathered, the light on her fingers became brighter. Wave your fingers, and a skill will be released randomly. However, there are thousands of skills. How could I be so lucky to release such a powerful skill? Zhang Rui thought to himself as he watched Pixie waving her fingers. At this moment, the fingers stopped waving, and the ground began to tremble violently. I saw huge rocks rising from the ground in front of Pixie, all like a giant sword, rushing towards Zhang Rui. Fuck, the sword of the cliff. Zhang Rui was completely stunned. Pixie's luck was so good that the sword of the cliff was easily used. What a terrible luck! When the young Kira's behind him saw Pixie's skills, his eyes also lit up. When would it have such strength? At this time, the Kabutosaurus took the lead and came to Zhang Rui, holding up a green barrier to resist the attack of the rock, but the body was still pushed back a few steps. After all, this is a skill exclusively for Groudon, and it was easily used by Pixie in front of him. Seeing that the attack stopped, Zhang Rui wanted to persuade, Pixie, my target today is only the young Kira's behind you. I hope you don't interfere. Otherwise, I will take you away too. At this time, Pixie didn't care. Its attack just now made the giant egg retreat a few steps, which means that its attack is threatening to Zhang Rui. Pixie ignored Zhang Rui's answer, but stood there and waved her fingers again. Zhang Rui didn't know what skills it would use next, so he said to the Kabutosaurus, use Dragon Wave to quickly end the battle. I'm a little worried that this Pixie will use some amazing skills. The Kabutosaurus nodded, and it also agreed very much. The attack just now was too strong. If its level was similar to it, I'm afraid that even using the defense would not be able to block this fatal attack. Watching Pixie waving her fingers happily there, the Kabutosaurus was gathering strength in its mouth, and soon a dragon-shaped phantom appeared, rushing towards Pixie. At this moment, Pixie had completed the action, and the surrounding thin water elements gathered towards Pixie, and a ball-sized hole began to appear around the body, and a large amount of water rushed out of the hole. The strong attack actually collided directly with the dragon-shaped phantom, and the power was so amazing that it was in a stalemate with the dragon-shaped phantom, but fortunately the Kabutosaurus was at a high level, and its power directly overwhelmed the impact of the water flow, defeated the water flow, and attacked Pixie. Pixie was knocked out by the powerful dragon-shaped phantom and hit the wall directly. Pixie didn't expect that with such a powerful attack, the opponent would be defeated directly, and the attack was on its body. At this time, young Kira's immediately ran over to help Pixie up, but Pixie still refused to admit defeat and shook his fingers again. Just now it was the root fluctuation, so what is this time? Is it the finishing touch? It shouldn't be possible that the airflow around suddenly changed, like covering the sky and the sun. The irregular airflow blew most of the Pippi away. If it weren't for the fact that young Kira's was very heavy, he would probably be blown away and couldn't even keep his body steady. This is really the finishing touch. Zhang Rui was stunned by the scene in front of him. This Pixie's luck is really good. The three super ancient beasts, their exclusive skills did not fall, and they were all used. A shadow resembling Rayquaza appeared in front of Pixie, glanced at Pixie, and then turned into a beam of light and rushed towards Kabutosaurus. Kabutosaurus, use Dragon Dive. Kabutosaurus' body was wrapped by a dragon-shaped shadow, ran towards the shadow of Rayquaza in front of him, causing a fierce collision. The strong airflow caused all the surrounding Pippi to be blown away, and even the body of young Kira shook slightly. Even if Pixie can use the skill of finishing touch, the gap between the levels cannot be made up. The energy generated by the shadow of Rayquaza is slowly dissipating during the confrontation with Kabutosaurus, while the power of Kabutosaurus is increasing. The overall situation has been decided. Zhang Rui took the lead in taking out the Pokeball from the warehouse, and captured Pixie the moment she lost her combat ability. Although this way of capturing is really contrary to the style of the trainer, it is a pity not to capture such a powerful Pokémon. At the moment when the shadow of Rayquaza completely dissipated, Pixie wanted to escape, but it was still a step too late. Together with young Kira's, she was hit hard against the rock wall by Kabutosaurus. When the two elves fell from the rock wall, Zhang Rui took out another elf ball and threw it at the two elves in the distance. Coincidentally, the elf ball hit the target he wanted to capture and put it into the elf ball. Now Zhang Rui admired his accuracy in throwing the ball, which could easily hit the elves when they fell. After the battle just now, the level of Kabutops was raised again, and the level finally reached level 35, and it learned a new skill, the Mind Hammer. By focusing the mind on the forehead, it can cause powerful attacks to the enemy, and sometimes it can even make it shrink. It can be said to be the evolution of the head hammer. With this skill, there is no need to use the head hammer in the future. After all, this skill is much more powerful than the power brought by the head hammer. Zhang Rui walked to Kabutops, touched its head, and then picked up the elf ball containing young Kira's and Pixie and put it on his body. System, exit the copy. Ding dong. Received host's command, exiting for host now. The black vortex appeared again, and just when Zhang Rui wanted to leave, he saw a familiar figure walking out of the cave.